we're growing more and more aware of the environmental impacts of the fashion industry and getting concerned in many ways about the clothes that we wear. And that's going to be our topic for tonight. Our speaker is Kathleen Kennedy, an associate professor of practice at the Norton School for Human Ecology at the University of Arizona. Kathleen is an expert in retailing, consumer products, and business strategy. As a faculty member at U of A since 2017, she's focused her teaching on ethical, responsible, and sustainable practices in the fashion and retail sectors. Concurrently, she's also been a postgraduate researcher at the Alliance Manchester Business School, where her research is focused on the impact of AI technologies on retailing and consumer buying decisions. Prior to her academic career, Kathleen had over 15 years of experience as an executive for major retailers and financial services companies. In these corporate roles, she spearheaded product development and sourcing initiatives, always emphasizing sustainability, social responsibility, and zero waste. An advocate for reform in the fashion industry, Kathleen teaches about balancing profit and principles. She provides students and professionals with ideas and inspiration for transforming traditional business practices to be more equitable, eco-conscious, and human-centric. Kathleen is committed to research and education that can enable the retail and apparel sectors to become a driving force for good, and she will help us learn how to contribute to that ourselves this evening. So take it away, Kathleen.
Thank you, Paula. First of all, I know that many of the people who are in tonight's session know a lot about this area, so I put together this presentation with the knowledge that some of what I'm going to present tonight you may or may not know. So I just want to mention out front that I recognize that I tried to be inclusive in terms of having everything in here, including things that we all may know, but I didn't want to omit things just because they were. So let me start out with that. Tonight I'm going to talk about how fashion is being reformed. And I use the word fashion because we use that to describe the general industry that brings us clothing and apparel. But the word fashion itself is a word that I generally tend to not use. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Right now, we have an industry that is undergoing a transition and transformation, but it's going to take a lot of effort for that to happen. We have an industry that I with no exaggeration, has built a Himalayas mountain range of unused, unwanted, and often unworn apparel and sold that to people with glitzy imagery. Right now, 35% of the microplastics in the ocean are from apparel, not plastic bottles. 50% of the apparel sold in the UK is never worn. 3 out of 5 fast fashion items and 88% of what's sold in the US in the way of apparel is fast fashion, ends up in landfills. It doesn't have any value to be reused. And maybe most surprisingly, approximately 64% of the apparel sold in the US and 70% of the apparel sold in the world is made out of plastic. So we don't look at fashion in this way, and we don't think about apparel being the primary source or the largest source of microplastics in our drinking water, but it's a problem. And it's a problem that I've been part of causing. I was a retail executive, so I know how hard it's going to be to transition out of the economy that we've built. When you see that red sale sign, we buy things. When you walk into a store and we see assortments that are laid out and beautifully presented, so they're so enticing, you feel like you absolutely must have 2 of these things, or you must have the matching bag that goes with it to complete that. We don't think about what's going on in background. and the fact that certain things are being done that involve toxic chemicals, that involve waste practices. We don't think about the people who are actually making the clothing, the working conditions that we're in, and this would be on the better side of what's done. They're faceless workers who are doing this, but the average apparel worker in the world earns $200 a month. In Bangladesh, it's $98 a month. And Bangladesh has increasingly become a source for outsourcing. We now have companies that outsource from the US to China, and the Chinese companies subcontract to lower wage places like Ethiopia, Bangladesh, India. One of the things to think about as we talk about sustainability is the people that are part of this system of making apparel. 300 million people are employed in the apparel industry in the world. It is a large industry, but it's particularly important in terms of employment. However, the lives of most of the people who work in these factories are not something that we should be proud of. So if you're wearing Nike material, it's like Nike shoes, Nike tops. A lot of it's made in Vietnam, and a lot of it's been made in factories by women who are not living in their original home. They are migrant workers that migrate from one part of Vietnam to another, leaving behind their families, their kids, sending home a quarter of what they earn, and making about $1 an hour. It's why this is a very attractive place to do things. But most of the workers who are making the products we're buying cannot afford to buy them. The other challenging thing about the apparel industry right now is apparel is often made in the world, meaning the cotton may be grown in Pakistan. The fabric may be made in 4 countries in 4 different stages. The garment may be cut in a 5th country. It's maybe sewn in the 6th country, and then it may be shipped out to the US to be packaged and sold. So there may be 7, 8 different countries in the supply chain before this even comes to the US in the first place, or to Europe, or to any place else in the world. And it's not just a Western problem, it's a global problem. The apparel industry is responsible, and you'll see various numbers. The best number I can find is that it's now 10% of the annual global carbon emissions. It used to be 12. The reason it's 10 is not because the apparel industry has improved, but because we have a whole lot more emissions from vehicles than we used to have. At the pace that it's currently at, the carbon emissions from the apparel industry are going to increase 50% by the year 2030. We are accelerating the production of carbon. About 20% of the world's wastewater is related to fabric dyeing and treatment, because in most places where this is done in the world, it's unregulated. And there's an image of one of the many rivers in India that are blue because of the denim dyeing. And then finally, and probably the most dangerous thing, because we have very few remedies for it, is that this is the #1 source of microplastics in our water. And we can consumers, we can prevent most of this. Microfibers are so prevalent in the water in the world that in testing mussels, the shellfish, 100% of the mussels in the world have microplastics in them now. So I love mussels, I eat mussels, I have microplastics in me. We have microplastics in our drinking water. Fast fashion is blamed for this, and I want to take one moment just to deal with the technical thing about what the term fast fashion means, and then say, I'm using it, but it's an improper term. What we should be saying is junk fashion. Fast fashion just means delinking fashion from the spring fall fashion designer schedule that was done and producing fashion rapidly so that we can bring to market items that better match consumer demands. However, the term fast fashion is applied to the kind of apparel that appeared in the 1990s, most notably by Zara which is Inditex out of Spain, the world's largest apparel retailer, H&M, and Topshop. They sort of built the way, and Topshop itself is one of the reasons why the UK has that stunning figure of 50% of the apparel's never worn. They set a style of spending in the UK in the early 90s, H&M and Topshop together, that the country's not recovered from. It's cheap. It's clothing that becomes cheaper and cheaper. It takes fewer hours of labor to own and has become disposable. The constant production of fast fashion and continual sales and promotions have created a culture of overconsumption that values quantity of items over quality and has resulted in a strange consumer behavior, which is the number of times a garment is worn is declining rapidly. This is one of the big challenges. So a t-shirt that 10 years ago would have been worn 10 times is now worn 3.5 times. A year ago, it was 4 times. The average usage is going down much less than it should be. And the final thing is there's massive hidden cost behind what's going on to workers, to animals, to resources, to our environment, and even to social structures. This is a large and important industry, and we cannot just blow it up because it provides employment for 300 million people in the world. It's a relatively small industry. It's only $1.3 trillion, which is small compared to some other things like, for example, retailing, which is a much larger industry, food production, other things. It's a discrete amount of the world's global economy, but it's one of the most labor intensive. And because of that, we need to be cautious about how we transition this and how we move to a different kind of model where we get workers who are paid fairly for their work. And I'll talk a little bit about automation in this industry in a minute. In the past 15 years, we've doubled the amount of apparel production and consumption. The per capita sales in mature economies are going up, but they're also going up in the rest of the world. So in Africa, in Southeast Asia, the middle class is growing and the amount of consumption is increasing. At the same time, clothing use is decreasing. Depending how you measure it, it's 36, 40, 48%. There's different ways to measure clothing use. I put about almost 40% because I'm going with the conservative number, which is 36 to 38%. We have devalued clothing by making it so inexpensive. Now, I know there's a few people in the room that I can see who are roughly my generation, which is older. I remember when I was growing up, I had 2 pairs of shoes. Shoes were expensive. Shoes were valuable. Shoes were something that you took to a repair shop. Now the majority of shoes that are worn are not repairable by design. They are fashion items rather than utilitarian items, and they are relatively inexpensive. So we don't value them, and we own a lot of them. And sometimes they're often not worn. So what we have is 2 things happening at the same time. Clothing utilization is declining rapidly. Clothing production is increasing dramatically. And so what we get is that the clothing production is outcreasing growth in the overall economy. And at the same time, the utility that we're getting from these clothes is lower. And the demand to produce cheaper and cheaper items is growing. So where does all the money go? First of all, this is a pair of Nike shoes sold, $100 pair of shoes sold in a retail store, not by Nike. If Nike sells it, the retail markup goes to them and they're paying for the retail store operations. And there's a little tiny slice in here that's tariffs and duties. It's not big. Throw it away. There's some other things in here. General, the GS&A expense, selling general and administrative expenses, primarily marketing to convince people to buy the products. In Nike's case, their brand is one of the world's most valuable brands, and that requires money to build it. The factory FOB cost, that's the cost it takes to bring it to the US importation point, which might be Los Angeles, or could be Nashville, Tennessee, a variety of places. They don't have to be at the coast. But that's the point at which it turns into a retail item. Everything, including the transport across the ocean, is a relatively small part of the cost of this. We do have some retailers who are becoming more transparent about the costs. This is a retailer called The Slow Label. They specialize in slow fashion, which is the opposite of fast fashion. They are transparent about their pricing. They also produce their apparel in markets where people are paid living wages. In this case, this particular top, the garment was made in Portugal, fabric was woven in the Czech Republic. And you can get an idea of what the costs are here. Logistics is the transportation cost. It is where the carbon, part of the carbon comes from, but it's really in a well-produced item, it's really not a large piece of what's going on. Much of the cost when you buy an item, this is an online provider, when you buy an item, a large part of that is the operating cost to run the retail business, to pay for the credit card transaction, to do all of that, and not for the garment itself. So generally you can think about 50% of the cost is the garment itself, and about 50% of the cost are the expenses to retail and sell that item, even in a vertically integrated model like this one. One solution to where we are, and one that many people support, is to shift to a circular model where we re-engineer things and we start to look at a new global textile systems with 3 focus areas. One, new business models that increase clothing use. If people start to buy fewer items that last longer, that are quality items, that are less linked to short-term trends, that helps. The second thing is to have safe and renewable inputs. And I'll talk about a few of those in a minute. And finally, you see the little circle within the circle down here, solutions so that clothing can be used to make new clothing. Most of the apparel that's sold cannot be recycled. You might be able to take a pair of jeans and embellish them or do something else with it, but most clothes are made with multiple types of fibers and made in ways in which you cannot disassemble them easily. We're starting to get more single material garments, which can be shredded and turned into new garments, and that comes to smart design. So I want to talk just a moment about the business models that we use. Traditional fashion started out with a designer having a great idea. They would come up with designs, the clothing would be produced, that clothing would be sold to a retailer, offered at a price, transported to a business, and eventually that would be distributed to people and used. Private label is when a retailer has their own line of merchandise. So Zara is a private label company. They sell their own merchandise. H&M, private label. We also see this at Target, Walmart, all over the place, Macy's. Private label means the retailer is controlling the beginning of the process. So it's a vertical integration strategy. It's brand focus. We start with the brand and what the brand stands for, and then we fix development cycles and things around what that brand should be. So if it's for Macy's, what does the Macy's individual private label brand stand for? And then finally, we have fast fashion. Fast fashion is not evil in itself. In fact, fast fashion reverses the process. Instead of putting merchandise in a store, and we've all walked, I'm going to pick on Macy's. I used to work for Federated, so their old name. You walk into a Macy's store and 85 or 90% of the apparel items are on sale. Why? Because there's a mismatch between what the buyers bought thinking people want it, and what consumers want to buy. Fast fashion said, let's break that cycle. We will first start with what consumers want, use that to build what we're going to make, and we're going to do it on many, many cycles. So instead of spring and fall fashion season, we delink it from the designer fashion seasons and these fashion trends that are being forced on people. Instead, we say, what are people buying a lot of? Oh, there's a market for more black t-shirts. Let's make more black t-shirts in Portugal and ship them to stores in Portugal. On its surface, this better matches what is manufactured to demand, and there's less wastage. So if you walk into a Zara store, you will not see much in the way of sale items. The prices are pretty close to what the market's willing to pay, and the merchandise matches the market. So Zara is one of the few retailers that has transformed itself to use to make localized garments that match what people want, and start to become more sustainable in their practices. They have their own designers on staff, and they have a commitment to be better. So this is one thing that caused the problem. It's an odd situation where the same business model that caused the problem can be used to fix part of the problem, to better match market and production. We have other companies using fast fashion. You may be aware of them. You often see their ads when you're online. You may see an ad for Shein, and you will see a garment that looks like a current style wool coat for $25, a ridiculous price. It's so low. And what this is a company that is using a gap in tariff laws to import huge amounts of quantities into the US, Brazil, and other countries without bringing them in volume. So you buy direct from a Chinese factory for an incredibly low price. You cut out all the middle people. However, if you want to return that $25 coat because it doesn't fit you, and often doesn't fit, or it's cheaply made, you have to pay $75 and spend 4 weeks to ship it back to China. We have a number of companies using this model. One of the most famous is a TikTok-based retailer called Princess Polly, which I don't know if anyone in the room is familiar with. They went from $0 to $150 million in 3 years by using TikTok to market cheap apparel that was very stylish, shipped direct from a Chinese factory to a US consumer. There's no tariff on that. It's incredibly cheap. They are trying to rebuild that company to make it more ethical and set up a distribution system in the US. So there's hope. So I wanted to spend a few minutes walking through what can consumers do, because consumers cause this problem. It's been caused by overconsumption. We can push the blame for many things in the world to other people, but the apparel consumption problem was caused by us. Before buying, take a look and see if the manufacturer uses sustainable criteria to make clothing. Buy only what you need. In the US, the number ranges from 20 to 60% of the clothing that's purchased is never used. According to McKinsey, a recent study from McKinsey, the average consumer buys 60% more apparel and clothing than they used to buy in the year 2000, and keeps it half as long. This is accelerating. We are using clothes less, we are buying more. Online shopping is one of the culprits. It's one of the areas I work in and study. It's available 24/7, night and day. It's linked to social media. It's made impulse buying greater. It made not returning items easier. You don't go to the store. It's difficult to ship it back. So what happens is people end up with clothes that they bought. The tags are never removed from the item. The item sits around and you just set it aside because it didn't cost you that much in the first place anyway. Buy better apparel that lasts longer. Simple rule: quality apparel in classic styles causes, if you buy the one item instead of two, it's going to create less pollution. If you use your garments longer because they're quality garments that last longer and look better after they're washed, then you're going to use them longer. You're going to cause less damage. I greatly admire Patagonia, which routinely runs an ad: "Don't buy this jacket," and then explain to you why you should not be buying a jacket, and you should only come to Patagonia and buy that jacket when your old one is really worn out and useless, and after you've done something with that. It's a phenomenal company. They're like a model for us to look at. Repair and remake clothing. We've gotten out of repairing clothing because it got so inexpensive. If it took a week's work to buy a pair of shoes, we would still have shoemakers around fixing them. We don't so much anymore. The other thing is, oftentimes you can remake, redo, cut an old my students are expert at this. They can take an old t-shirt and turn it into something wonderful with a pair of scissors and one needle and thread and sew something spectacular. It's kind of fun. It's very rewarding, and you get something you styled yourself. And then finally, buy secondhand and vintage items. And I'm going to throw something out because we're in holiday season. Buying vintage items as gifts is a whole lot better than buying somebody a scratchy wool sweater they're never going to wear. So think about vintage gifting as we walk into the holiday season. One of the least worn items are holiday gift apparel items. And we all know that that's that navy blue cardigan my mom sent me years ago. It's still in my closet, and I feel guilty if I get rid of it. So what else can you do? Wardrobe key items and basics. Some of us are already expert at this, others not so much. Be creative in recombining and combining items. I mean, think about clothes that you have that you can put together. Reject fashion. I don't know that anybody in this group is like reading the latest issue of Vogue or Harper's Bazaar to know what you're supposed to be wearing, but reject this. Fashion was invented along with the Industrial Revolution to get rid of excess goods because we could manufacture so much. Now with automation, the trend cycle is shortening and shortening, so that sometimes a trend will last for 3 or 4 weeks, which is causing us to have more disposable clothes. I'm sure that some of us don't think about wardrobes, but we all have them. We all have multiple items of clothing that we use in different ways. So a sustainable wardrobe is a collection of clothing that includes quality, versatile, and wearable items. I'm going to go out on a limb and think that Trace is probably already there, but some of us may not be quite so good. So I'm gonna go through some steps on maybe how to get there. First of all, do a closet clean out and be brutal and get rid of all the stuff that doesn't fit, even if it's got the tags on it still and you never wore it, you feel guilty. Get rid of the stuff you don't like. Get rid of duplicates that are really similar in color. I like black boots. It's my weakness. I own a lot of them. I don't need all of them. Somebody else could use them. So get rid of them. Get rid of the colors that don't work. I love orange, but I can't wear it. That's why I picked the model in the orange dress to remind me that I have some things in my closet I never wear because they're just wrong. Get them out of your closet sooner than later. They have more utility in the world. Get rid of things that are stained or damaged beyond repair and recycle them responsibly. Organize what remains and have a logical system for organizing them. Just a couple things that we know from research. Most people stack items on a shelf or in a drawer so that you've got a t-shirt on top of a t-shirt on top of a t-shirt. If you rotate the things in your drawer so you can see all of them, we have so much stuff that you can see all the tops you have and you can find the color that you want. You'll end up wearing some things you haven't worn in the past, which will make everything else last longer. The other method that works is you can use the t-shirt roll so that you see the ends of all the tops. So you can see, oh, I do have 2 purple ones and I've got 2 blue ones that are the same color. Maybe I can get rid of one. Somebody else can use it. Maybe I can trade it with someone. And then reevaluate what remains. I happen to have spent a number of years of my life working for retailers that sold apparel. I like apparel a lot. I probably own too many things that have limited use that would be classified as statement pieces. I may be alone in this room or not. Too many statement pieces, really distinctive items, they don't get worn very often. If you have those, and you can blend in some more utilitarian pieces and dress them down and use them more as the world's gotten more casual and extend their life. If you have a minimalist wardrobe, I'm going to pick on my husband. My husband wears 2 colors of t-shirts, 2 kinds of like cargo shorts and cargo pants, and they're in like 2 colors. I mean, he has a minimalist wardrobe. And anybody's ever met him knows he has a minimalist wardrobe. He probably needs to like mix in some other things just so I don't get so bored looking at him. But you can add in something that will give your neutral wardrobe a new lease on life. So it's how you pick things. And I'll talk about a few ones in a minute. This is my personal mission with students. Avoid the buy the capsule look trap. This is being heavily sold right for about the past 5 years. The way to get a sustainable wardrobe is to just buy a spring or a summer and a winter capsule. And the capsules have all these items in them that none of which we need. And they tend to have seasonal colors in them. This happens to be the seasonal color set for summer 2022. It looks out of date right now. It's a really bad investment. The capsuling idea was great, but importing into it the current tones, colors, and whatever from the runway is a trap. And women are getting seduced to this at a very high rate, and they're buying this whole thing, often getting a 15% discount for completing it. So how can you really build a sustainable wardrobe? Start by figuring out what your purpose of your wardrobe is. I switched careers from a corporate career to teaching. My wardrobe needs right now are to be utilitarian. I need to look decent, but I need to be comfortable. My purpose for my wardrobe change. I took years, I'm sad to admit, I took years to go take all my corporate clothes, stack them all up and get them out of my closet, get them to somebody who could use them. Thankfully, there's a good purpose and good use. I owned a lot of suits. I do not need to wear suits anymore. What's your budget? What's your timing? How much are you going to spend so you don't get seduced into seeing something 75% and going, oh my God, it's 75% off. I need to buy it. We don't like to admit it, but we see that red sale sign and we react. Not all of us, many of us. The majority of consumers cannot resist an incredible sale deal. That's why retailers do it. What matters? Take some time to think about what's important to you. What I consider to be sustainable and important may not match what you consider to be important. So I support companies that are doing economic development work to support creating more organic cotton and helping farmers transition in developing countries. So I'll give you one of my favorites later on that's doing that. I care about fair wages to the workers. So I make sure the companies that I buy from do both of those. I don't want to put microplastics into the water, so I do not wear certain synthetic clothing. I definitely do not wear clothes made out of oil. That's my value set. What matters to you? I don't eat animals, and I'm not going to wear animals. So I don't wear animal leather anymore. We have lots of good alternatives. One of them invented in Sonora, Mexico, which is cactus leather. Gorgeous, buttery, soft, wonderful stuff. Learn about options, do some research. find a handful of brands you really like and support them. Um, there was a rule that came out in 2017, and then the people who put it out there backed off of it, which was the more than 30 wears rule. I like this rule. I think it's simple and easy to think about. Only buy something you know you're going to be willing to wear 30 times. I know when I really love something, I wear it over and over and over again. I go grab it because I love it. We all have those items, and they sit in a sea of things that we don't wear. And lastly, think transseasonally. Do not allow the fashion industry to convince you that there's 4 apparel buying seasons. Buy things that you can layer and switch out so that you have one set of clothes. Um, on the research, be really careful of company provided promotional messaging that tells you how sustainable the company is. So, for example, there's a famous brand, Lululemon. They have pages and pages of information about how sustainable they are. They outsource their manufacturing and their production, and the majority of their apparel is made out of synthetics that derive from oil. There is nothing sustainable about this company. So you can find things that look like a company is sustainable, but they're not. And you'll see this with a lot of things. So I I made fun of that marketing capsule idea, but think about capsulizing things that'll work together, pieces that go together instead of buying items that don't have fabric that'll match much of what you do. Special occasion, rent, don't buy. One of the greatest inventions of recent time is the fact that we now have special occasion apparel that you can rent for a low price. Those are the items that people buy and use once. Bridesmaid dresses. All right, if you're ever in a wedding party or your mother or the bride, you buy that dress, you wear it once. Same for men's clothing. Um, People are now renting, not buying clothes to go to an important interview. So there's lots of occasions where you can do this. Some people are becoming more sustainable by joining rental clubs where they share out of a shared wardrobe with a group of people. So there's all kinds of options in this space. Select fabrics and materials with care. Maybe the best thing you can do is to buy things that are made out of materials that are better for the environment. I'm not going to read this whole list, you all can see it, but I am going to just mention a couple other things. Many items that come tagged to say dry clean only, you can wet clean. You can clean them with a gentle detergent and cold water, and it's not bad for the environment. And last, you can do a clothing swap with your friends. You can host a party. You can set up a small group. You have some things you're not using, maybe you can trade them out to somebody who'll use them. And wash with sustainability in mind. One of the largest contributors to unsustainable fashion is how we wash our items. One of the most confusing parts of the entire clothing world is the materials that are good and the materials that are not good. Um, Opt for natural materials that are organic and recycled. Cotton, linen, and hemp are the best, even though cotton uses a lot of water. We can talk about that. You can watch where you buy your cotton from. Egyptian cotton, for example, is irrigated with Nile River water. It's not damaging to the environment as much as some other things. Natural fibers still shed fibers when you wash them, but the fibers are less harmful than synthetics. One big note is avoid conventional cotton and linen. They both have an enormously negative environmental footprint behind them, particularly the pesticides used to grow both. Synthetic fibers like polyester are made from petroleum and they're not biodegradable. Some companies are really trying to convince people that their products that are made from oil are biodegradable and they're not. These products take twice as much energy to produce than cotton. So although cotton is not perfect, there's no completely sustainable choice. better to avoid three things: polyester, acrylic, and nylon. Unless you have a compelling need for those products, and there are some outdoor uses where doing this is really important. So make sure you buy something that's going to last for a number of years. I mentioned Patagonia a while ago. I have a Patagonia jacket that is now in its 30th year of use. It looks brand new. It is made out of an oil-based synthetic. It's an old Patagonian item. It's wonderful. If I wore it and walked in a room with you, you would think it was brand new. So some of these things, I don't know what the end of their life is. If it's well made, that may be a good use for it. Some semi-synthetics and synthetics are okay and they biodegrade. The two most notable, decent for the environment ones, the first one is Lyocell. This is made from sawdust or delimbing trees or scrap wood that's left over. It's marketed as Tencel. It is a form of rayon that's made in a closed loop process, but the chemical structure of lyocell biodegrades. So you get some of the properties of a synthetic without the damage, and it's not made from oil. And now we have some new methods like growing beech trees and delimbing them to use the limbs. Harvest some limbs, use that to make lyocell. The limbs grow back very rapidly. So it's a sustainably produced fabric. It also uses waste products, most notably sawdust and wood pieces that can't be used for other things. I didn't put it on here, but I want to just do a mention of bamboo. Bamboo is used to make a rayon that's not biodegradable, that's terrible for the environment, that uses a lot of chemicals in the process. Bamboo is very complicated. You can grow bamboo. It's a renewable resource. It's grown in places that have a lot of water to use. The water does not get damaged by growing bamboo. So companies tell a really good story about how green it is. Green. It is not most of the time. It's being used to make synthetics that are not biodegradable. So just because you start with a plant material doesn't mean that it's going to end up being good for the environment. So you need to research the specific bamboo product. Bamboo rayon is still bad for the environment. One way to figure this out, and it's becoming more common, is the GOTS, Certified Natural Fabrics label, which will tell you that it meets an organic standard and it is worth having. So here's my 6 examples of great companies. I could have given you 99. If you want more, you can Google 99 sustainable apparel companies and you'll get a bunch of blog posts, most of which are good. Give them to you. My first shout out is to Patagonia. They're using short supply chains. They sell in 10 countries and they manufacture in some of the countries they sell in. They manufacture and run their own factories in 16 countries. They have ethical practices. They resell items. They repair what they sell. And they encourage people not to buy unless they really need something. Wonderful company. Next one up, Harvest and Mill. Harvest and Mill is an example of a whole new set of companies from the US. Harvest and Mill is grown, milled, sewn in the US. They support organic American cotton farming and local sewing communities. So if you want to encourage us to have more US-based apparel production, finding these small companies is a good way to do that. This company happens to sell basics, but I own some of them and they're high quality products. There are hundreds of these companies now, little bits. The US only produces 2% of the apparel sold in the US. So this is an area that as consumers we can encourage growth in. TR Collective does wonderful women's wear clothing. I apologize for the skew to women's wear, but most of the problems are coming out of women's wear and most of the purchase are coming out of women's wear. So I mentioned this one. They sell a high proportion of low impact materials closed loop dyeing, not using chemicals in the manufacture of the fibers, etc. They also ensure that everything they sell, the supply chain includes a living wage for the workers. A day. I happen to be wearing this now. They make the most comfortable stuff that you can imagine. It's all GOTS certified. They specialize in minimalist clothing, things you don't wrinkle. So you want easy care, sustainable clothing that doesn't wrinkle. It's a good place to check out. Super comfortable. It's not inexpensive, however. Cotton. Cotton is a really cool company. They're from Egypt. And I mentioned Egyptian cotton previously. Cotton from the southeast of the United States, where we have rain, where we grow our cotton, and cotton from Egypt. These are places in the world where we're not draining rivers and lakes to grow cotton. This is a company that sells Egyptian cotton, which is long, stable cotton, super soft, products that are made there, and they're doing it in a way that funds economic uplift for workers. Impact. They put back funding into schools and into helping farms move from traditional conventional methods to organic farming. My last one is Reformation, partly because they're using recycled and upcycled materials and they guarantee fair wages. So if you want a trendy item that's made out of things that aren't harmful to the environment, this is a really good place to go. We have tons of options now for where to buy great apparel. And my last thing, how we wash our clothes and how we dry our clothes has enormous effect on the environment. And most consumers aren't aware of this. So you can put in a microplastic or microfiber filter. I'll show you another solution in a second for this. Only wash full loads of laundry. Doing small loads of laundry is really bad for the environment and it's also bad for your clothes, because the smaller the load is, the more friction you have. Even if you put on that delicate cycle setting, it'll shed fibers. So particularly if you have any synthetics in your wash, you want it to be a full load. Wash fabrics less often. The more you wash things, the more harm is going to be caused. And you need to wash clothes enough to maintain health and not have your friends and family unhappy. Wash things on cold and wash them for less time. If you reduce, many washers have a heavy, dirty, medium, light, or you can control the wash cycle time. Don't do the extra rinse if you don't need to. Use a low abrasive laundry detergent. Don't use Tide. Tide has got it's 40% of America. They have abrasives in them. And then if possible, if you're going to go buy a new washer, buy a front loader. Front loaders use less water, they're less harmful on your clothes, and they shed fewer fibers into the environment. This is a marketing trick that was played on Americans in the 1960s. 1950s, everybody had front loaders. The 1960s, you had to get a new modern machine. Then it has a top loader, was what was modern. And the American manufacturers got us all the switch. You might remember the Maytag commercials and the commercial with the arm coming out of if you're older. If you don't want to fuss around with a filter, you can buy an inexpensive guppy bag and put in fleece and synthetic items before you wash them. That'll trap all the microfibers. The bag will protect your clothing. They'll last longer. They'll look better. And it takes just a moment to clean out the microfibers later. And then you can just use it on the next wash. These are wonderful. It's a good Christmas gift to give your friends, by the way, instead of that bad sweater they won't wear. All right, we live in Tucson, most of us anyway. Dry your clothes on a line and it'll be better for the environment. And we might not think that there are microplastics involved with the dryer, but there are. Not only does it save energy, your clothes smell better. They're more wonderful afterwards. Don't use dryer sheets. If you want something, you get the dryer balls. They'll separate your laundry and do as much. They shorten the dryer time. You can get also ones that are made out of merino wool if you don't want anything plastic, and they will make the dryer time faster. You can install an outdoor lint trap that reduces the amount of microfibers that escape out of your dryer vent that end up in our water system when it rains. Fleece in particular in the dryer is a problem, and it's surprising how much they've traced to it. So with that, I'm going to stop the share. I know I talked a lot. I'm going to stop the share and open it up for any questions or comments from y'all. So
Kathleen, there were a good number of comments and questions in the chat, and maybe we can, one sticks out here. How about hemp? You listed hemp.
hemp is good. Hemp is wonderful. Hemp is probably, no, I'm serious. Hemp, unless somebody starts to make rayon out of hemp, just watch for that. Nobody's doing it. Hemp uses about 1/20th of the water of cotton. It has wonderful properties. It lasts a really long time. It barely sheds anything when you wash and dry it, and it has a very, very long life. It lasts longer than cotton. So now some people, and I'm going to say this, some people find some hemp fabrics are scratchy. So my only advice on hemp is, if you don't know a retailer and you don't want to fool around, you don't really want to buy something from an online retailer and send it back because you make a big carbon footprint out of doing that. You may want to buy from people you know, or buy from a store where you can touch it first to make sure it's not scratchy hemp. About 20% of hemp t-shirts are returned by people because they're scratchy.
Okay.
Not everybody has that sensitivity, just some of us.
Okay. I'm going to go through some of these in the chat and maybe call on people. Dan, why don't you unmute and ask your question about Patagonia and REI?
Yeah.
I think actually Erica Ingve already answered it, but I did ask about, you were mentioning Patagonia, and of course, Patagonia does have a program where they will take clothes back. It's actually run through a different company, which Erica, you may want to help me out with that one because I forgot the name.
Yeah.
But they, they'll take back clothes that are still serviceable. They will check and make sure that they're good, clean them, and then they'll resell them as part of their resale program. And that way you can get things like high quality clothes that just keep cycling through the store. And you get a benefit of getting a credit for something you can't wear anymore.
Yeah, there's more and more retailers doing this. So you will find Eileen Fisher was one of the leaders in this, Lululemon. But you'll see many, many, many retailers are now doing this. Oddly, and I want to just mention the dangerous side of this, because for some reason, certain retailers can take anything good and make it terrible. H&M will take back the clothing that you don't want from them anymore, and they will give you a coupon to buy more H&M clothing. And then they will throw the clothing you brought back into the landfill. So watch out what the retailer's doing with the clothes on these programs. H&M just wanted to clean out people's closets, give them a reason to buy more stuff from them. So they're continuing the cycle without reuse. So you have to just do a little research on what is the company doing. Lululemon is not a great company, but they did launch a good program. So not great companies can do good things.
I have a quick thing to add to that.
Yes.
Yes, this is Erica Ingve. Yeah, I was at the 10 West Festival, and I interviewed Andy Rubin of Trove, Trove, and he was the one who started these programs. So yes, it has to be a quality product to start with to be able to do that, where they actually use it for resale and don't throw it away. But if you go onto his site, you can see he even worked with Eileen Fisher and a bunch of other big names.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
He's wonderful. Yep.
Yeah,
thanks.
He's wonderful. And by the way, I want to give, I did give a shout out to Patagonia just as an exemplar for companies doing this. There are a lot of them doing it. It's grown rapidly. Um, you'll see many companies doing this that are not necessarily sustainable in their practices, but it's still a great way to get a great value and to buy something that's already been made. So thanks, Erica.
Okay, we've got a question from Millie. What's the best place to donate clothes to ensure they're actually reused?
Depends what you have to donate. One of the best places to put clothes that are really high quality clothes that are currently in style is to get them to a consignment shop where they get sold, even if you donate the money, or to Buffalo Exchange. Well, that's only going to be certain things that are highly saleable. And the only reason I say that is that's going to go back into the retail market rapidly without shipping. So because you can drop by a local Buffalo Exchange and do it. And that's really going to apply to people who have clothing that's appealing to their target customers, who are people 18 to 29 years old. All right. Plato's Closet is another one of these places. If you have very, very high quality clothes, that's a great place to go. If you're looking for donations where it's going to be reused rather than used for rags, and the clothing is really still good, then the Salvation Army and the St. Vincent's, the Catholic clothing charity, tend to have a better track record of putting the clothing back into use than Goodwill Industries. So Goodwill, a large portion of the clothing donated to them gets turned into rags, and sometimes it ends up in the trash, in the landfill. It's partly because what people bring to Goodwill is very low quality. I'm going to tell you a couple other things that are really good to do, and I can't do this for menswear because I don't know menswear charities as well. For women's work apparel, which in our current casual world includes some nice casual attire, many of the women's shelters are desperately need workwear. They need quality blazers, they need blouses, they need tops. So that is possible. That's where I donate my clothes, is to some of the shelters that are helping women transition out of bad situations back into the workforce. Lastly, there's a campus closet program at the University of Arizona. They're probably not going to want to have my clothes, all right, because they're not designed for student wear. But if you're younger, that's a great place to trade out things. It also does a great thing for students because students can go to the University of Arizona campus closet and take out something to wear. So a lot of students get their interview clothes from the campus closet. And that was actually started by students in our retailing program. Almost every major university in the US has a program like this. I prefer ours, the University of Arizona, but you can go anywhere. But that's what mine would be. I'm gonna say the last thing. If you have really good clothing that and you don't need the money and you know somebody who might use it, you may just want to see if a friend wants it. And this is particularly useful for children's apparel, toddler clothes, which don't last very long. I'm going to speak from personal experience. When my son was pre-born, one of my friends and a neighbor gave me 2 years worth of clothes that were like new. It was wonderful. And they were wonderful clothes. So do think if there's somebody in your network, somebody you know, who could just use what you have, or can you trade things with people? I'm working on becoming a smaller size. I'm hoping I'm going to have all my clothes to give away to people. That's my mission.
So I want to add one thing to what you said about the women's shelters. The YWCA has a program called My Sister's Closet.
Yeah.
Which is also geared towards getting business and job suitable clothes for women.
Great
and,
one.
you mentioned a clothing swap. I think it's Saturday. I'm not 100% sure, but Saturday afternoon, I think, at Tucson Village Farm, there's going to be a clothing swap.
Perfect.
So if you go to the website for Tucson Village Farm, you can get the details and the information, and that'll be a great opportunity to give some stuff and get some stuff. And then my question, because you didn't mention them in the places where one could donate, what about Savers?
No, I have no experience, so
Okay.
I would just say I don't. I tell you what I don't think is a good idea. I don't think it's a very good idea to ship your clothes across the country to somebody like ThredUp, and so that they can resell the things online. I think that's a destructive model. There's one I didn't mention. If you have good clothing, men's or women apparel, there are some peer-to-peer, meaning you post what you have and then you ship it directly to the buyer. It's got a lower carbon footprint. That would be like Poshmark.
Yeah.
So those work. I try to keep the carbon footprint low. I just don't have any experience with that, Paula.
Yeah, no,
The,
they are
the
in-
clothing swap, I forgot the clothing swap, and that's a great idea. I forgot it. We're in November.
Okay. Let's go.
I guess can I just add one more thing to the what to do? This is my own, Miss Smart, my own kind of thought on this. I would rather try to find somebody I can give something to who will use it that I can get it to close in our community, because Tucson has a lot of need. Rather than ship it back to a resale market where I get a discount on buying more clothes. If you can afford to do that, that's a really nice thing to do, to try and keep it in this community. And I do want to say that I did kind of knock Goodwill there, and I don't really mean to. If you have good items that go to Goodwill, they stay here. They do have people work on them and provide employment, so I probably shouldn't have been quite so negative about that. It's just people tend to give them bags and bags of things that have no market, and that's not a good thing to do.
Well, I asked about Savers because they are local, even though it's not a locally.
Yeah. I just don't know enough about how they function and what they actually sell versus what actually gets discarded.
I don't know percentages, but I do know I get most of my clothes there. So
Oh, I should check them out. I'll check them out and report back. How's that?
it's a wide variety. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have interesting things in their assortment. It's just how much, like Buffalo Exchange, you can bring in 50 items, they'll take 2.
Yeah.
You're not going to get very much taken there. So I'll run an experiment. I'll bring some stuff into
Okay.
Savers, see what happens.
Okay, let's go to hands up. Breeza.
Hi. So a few comments as far as I definitely appreciated the best way to keep your nice clothes is basically never put them in the dryer. They have a tendency to get worn a lot faster. Also,
by the way, it'll cut the life of most apparel items in half.
Yeah.
To put them in a dryer.
Oh, and also what I've been doing is I have I'll put on a nice shirt and some pants and go have lunch with a friend, but then I come home and immediately take off that nice shirt and those pants and go out and start working in the garden. So I actually, will put my clothes back on a hanger, put them outside, just let them air out a little bit and bring them back inside.
Yeah, it's a great, by the way, before you move on, if you have a garment that can be in the sun, it will deodorize. The sun itself will deodorize the item. So if you hang it on a line where wind is going through it a little bit and it's in sunlight,
Mhm.
that will partially clean a garment. So if it's lightly used,
Yep.
it doesn't need to go into the wash. And I think a lot of us have been raised, wear it once, wash it once,
Yeah.
even if you wore it for, as you said, to go to lunch with a friend for an hour.
So, and
Great
there's,
suggestion.
I've had, so I kind of wanted to join this, um, discussion because I was, I particularly want to thank you as far as the garment industry, and I didn't realize a lot of the information as far as the microplastics and how much has actually been waste. I'm not a wasteful person, and yes, I shop at Savers also,
Oh, cool.
and I've gotten some of my best. I love little button down short sleeve shirts. Gotten some really nice Columbia brands there, and but I was hoping that maybe because you show those bales of clothing that are no longer being used in there. I don't know whether they get shipped out to a landfill. There's probably a mixture of fibers that can't be recycled readily. So, and you briefly mentioned that some of your students would take something like a t-shirt that has like something on it that they really like, their best friend gave them 10 years ago, except t-shirts frayed. Is there anything as far as getting some of these materials that can still be used rather than being just used as rags, as far as recycled into other things like quilts,
Yeah,
making something else from that that it wasn't previously used for?
reusing fabrics, and this is one of the interesting things. And um, I actually used to work for Hancock Fabrics, which I don't know if anybody remembers,
Oh, yeah.
but I do quilt making. So synthetic fabrics are not very good for making quilts or that kind of things. However, let's sort of set aside the synthetics for a moment because there's certain things you can do with them. Sure. But the problem is the sheer volume of what's being produced is so great that denim can be shredded and reused. 100% polyester items can be reshredded and used, but there's not a market for it. So if you can buy products, clothing that are made out of recycled fibers, you start to create a market for the recycled fibers, which will help get those bales of things done, kind of some of them not in landfills. The problem we have is if we make, and I didn't really talk much about automation, we now have factories, and we have one in Arkansas that does this. We now have factories with very few employees that can make thousands and thousands and thousands of t-shirts an hour. All right. We've reached a point of automation where certain garments can be made in such a huge volume at such low cost that we are headed into a nightmare scenario if we don't change the consumer buying pattern first. And there's very little, a student might remake one t-shirt, but the fact is that same student may well buy 40 t-shirts in a year. So we're out of balance, and we're not going to make denim clothespin bags enough to change the problem. So I would love to say, yeah, we could all go out and craft our way out of this. Not going to happen. We might be able to get to a point, though, where, and the EU has made a step forward on this, which is the EU has passed legislation. The US is looking at similar legislation that will be a regulation that may be put in place at the end of the year, that you will no longer be able to lie and say that you're using green methods when you aren't. So bamboo, everywhere you see it, there's little beautiful bamboo leaves, and they say how wonderful it is. I got sucked into bamboo until I went and researched it and realized how bad it was. It's soft, it's wonderful. There's a really good story to tell about the bamboo growing itself. It's what happens after that that's the problem. I just think that we need to, as a society, shift our focus to buying better quality things and then keeping them in use and getting this cheap stuff out of the cycle and stop making clothes out of plastic. Those two things alone would do it. The last thing is better that you go to Savers or somewhere else and buy something that's already been in use and made than buy something new. If we shop vintage and we shop resale, we do more good than almost anything, because that's creating that market for this continuous loop. And my hope is that we can create a bigger market in Tucson for that.
Great. Okay, Jennifer, you've been very patient with your hand up. Am I
Hi. So my question revolves more around the luxury brand industry, as there have been some like luxury brands going towards a more sustainable route. For example, Gucci launched a line that was sustainable not too long ago, and I was wondering, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that higher end or luxury brands face when moving in a more sustainable direction if they choose to?
The biggest problem is that they're linked to fashion cycles that are very short. So you mentioned Gucci, there are a number of brands. They're often the apparel's in the moment, and it looks like last season's stuff in a year. So it doesn't have a very long life cycle. And oddly, luxury products, there's two kinds of luxury products, classic items. So a Chanel bag, let me just give a shout out to the Chanel brand for this. A Chanel bag never goes out of style. That's a luxury item that you pay an enormous amount of money for. Most people can't afford. I lust after them, to be frank. But you have it for your whole lifetime, and people pass them down within their families, etc., and take care of them. That's one kind of luxury item. The other kind of luxury items, which are becoming less important, and thankfully this is a trend, the kind of 1990s concept of luxury was, it was a in the moment style made out of exotic materials that made you look unbelievable, like you just walked off the runway or out of a magazine. That piece of fashion is now being replaced by a more sensible approach in luxury, and a redefinition that luxury is more like that Chanel bag and less like the in the moment style. In fact, that in the moment style sometimes looks foolish. Now, it seems funny, but if you go back and look at a Vogue magazine from the 90s or zeros, whatever we call that first decade of the 21st century, and it just looks odd. Why would you buy that? So that's the biggest challenge is many of their buyers are older, affluent people who have a set idea that I want what was on the runway in spring. I want to change it out in fall, etc. And it's very temporary. We've had this fashion model for 200 years. It's not going to go away easily. The second challenge that the luxury brands have is going to be a funny one that I mentioned. The couture craftspeople are aging, and they are not being replaced by people who know how to make couture clothing. And I'm really talking about the very top part of luxury. Spanish and Italian leather workers, French and Italian couture seamstresses. The next generation of people is not there. And so this is a real challenge. It is something that it sounds funny, but making apparel and making luxury apparel is a wonderful job for people to do. It's a rewarding craft. You're paid well for it. And we need to make sure the luxury brands are actually investing money to train the next generation of workers. But this one you wouldn't think of. I don't think I would have thought of. Leather workers are scarce. So a great question, Jennifer. Last thing I'll say is affluent, educated consumers are demanding that brands are ethical and that they use sustainable practices and etc. However, and so that's why we saw the adoption of cactus leather by luxury brands, go through the roof. Because here we had a vegan product that feels like the finest, it's better than the finest Italian leather, and it lasts a really long time. So it has luxury leather good properties, but it's made out of prickly pear cactuses, which we all know grow with very little harm to the environment. So I just think the buyers are more ready than the brands are. Some of the large companies, LVMH, who owns 50 houses, have moved very rapidly to become more sustainable and to really put in real sustainability practices. The last thing, and I'm sorry to talk so long about this, because many of these luxury brands are in the EU, and the EU is the farthest ahead in the world in terms of pushing towards sustainable practice and workers' rights. We are getting better practices out of luxury brands than non-luxury brands. Where we have terrible practice is that next tier. It's what we used to call bridge. It sits between luxury and upper moderate. So these are mass market products made by designer brands. So Gucci has a good line, and then they have a bridge line that's not so good. So that's really where the problem is. And that is in what we call the corridor of masses, where the mass of people are buying. And so we have a huge problem in Asia with people buying a lot of that stuff. And there is not a strong environmental movement in China, for example, where we have a burgeoning upper middle class. It's not there yet. It will be there.
Wow.
So, yeah, wonderful question. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, and Stuart, you've got a question or comment.
Thank you, Kathleen. Really wonderful talk. And I'm wondering about the microplastics. You're saying that the good to buy something is made from the recycled fibers like Patagonia makes this fleece. Yet isn't that the stuff that's fraying off and getting out into the environment?
Yeah, I'll put it in a guppy bag. I laughed years ago when I was first told about them, and I got some. They're wonderful. They make your clothes last longer, comes out of the wash better, traps all those microplastics. Or you can, if you're not willing to do that, and some people don't want to do that, I don't buy any virgin plastic apparel. That's my mission right now, and there's plenty of choices not to. But recycled polyester is growing rapidly, and you can recycle it and recycle it and recycle it almost continuously. So it does fit circular practices. We just need to wash it differently. The bags are inexpensive. It doesn't take very long to throw things in it. And if you've never done it, a large load, you might want to use 2 bags. I sort them. I'll be frank, I'm not organized. I hate laundry. I am the last person who should ever say anything about laundry, but that's not that hard to do. Most of us can do it. The other thing is, pick a detergent that is non-abrasive or low abrasive, and that will make a lot of difference, because the abrasive detergents, particularly like the powdered detergents, are a huge problem. I have not done enough research to be sure about the status of the new detergent sheets and how abrasive they are, but I think they're good. Somebody else may know who's here, but I just have not taken the time to do it. That's the one where you don't get the jug.
And,
Thanks, Kathleen.
and Miriam points out, you said you were going to talk more about filters for the microplastics.
Oh, yeah, you can get 2 kinds of filters for microplastics. If you don't want to bother with doing anything to, like putting your stuff in a bag, you can put a filter on your washer, and you could put a filter on the outflow of your dryer. There's all kinds of instructions how to do this. The Ocean Conservancy has a really good one. Just Google it and you'll find it. They're very inexpensive, and you just periodically clean them out. You need to put them in a place you can find. There's a retrofit for your washer where you can put it right near your washer. So it's like the same effort as cleaning out your dryer lint filter. And then the only other thing is, that dryer lint filter, And sometimes we get lazy and don't clean it out every time. Clean it out every time. I went through a whole long report recently about why that matters and the difference it makes. It won't matter for the microplastics that much. It matters for energy use. The numbers were astounding. It's like one of these, take what, 2 minutes of your life in a year and save 10% on your dryer electric bill. So it's just one of those, you get paid to do it. So we should do it. Thanks. Is that enough? You can find the instructions readily online. The Department of Energy of the US government has instructions on a variety of other places. We actually have we have a current administration that is helping consumers be more environmentally respectful.
I think I get it.
Okay, and where would one get the guppy bags?
You can Google it. They're sold by lots of retailers. And I will hold on. I'll just put a link in chat for one. I and just give me 1 second. That is a particular brand. You can get them from Patagonia. You can get them from a number of other places. They're not inexpensive. They come in different sizes, and I just to give you an idea, you can buy direct from them, guppyfriend.com. But I just Googled it and got about 40 places to buy them. They're available all over the place. If you want, Paula, I can find out which retailers in Tucson stock them. The only one that I'm more up to date on e-commerce than I am with what's in physical stores. Thanks to COVID, I'm just out of date with stores.
Okay. Yeah, that would be helpful.
So I'll send that to you afterwards.
Okay.
As a newsletter attraction. I'll also I'm going to check out Savers along the way and make sure that that's a good one. I expect it is.
We'll
They're
see.
very nice people, but let me find out.
Okay. And Emily reminded you to put up the link to the Google form for the.
Yes, I can get that.
I'm
Oh, you got it, Trace? Great.
Okay. So Emily, you see the link there from Trace. Great.
And Emily, thank you for reminding us. If you have any problem with that, just email me at kjkennedy@arizona.edu.
Okay.
And I'll fix it for you.
Are there any other comments or questions? We've got some really good suggestions and personal commentary in the chat of what people do and what they find useful, and including products.
Can I just do a shout out for one comment in here, which was from Millie? And I just want to thank you for this one. It comes down to what we value. Most people value low cost, many out of necessity. But if we value quality and longevity instead, the current system of disposable fashion could change and bring the price down on reusable, longer lasting items. It's a wonderful comment. I really appreciate the sentiment of this. I think one of the tragedies related to this is that many people who have money to do something else also buy massive amounts of apparel, and it may not be at a low cost, but it is at a low use. So I saw that comment and it rang so true. I believe that consumers are the force that are going to change the way the apparel industry behaves, and it'll only change if we stop feeding this beast. So don't buy $3 t-shirts. And don't buy the bag of 24 pairs of socks at Target, because those socks are actually being made in ways that are bad for the environment. The only way you can get a t-shirt and sell it for $1.99 is you're leaving behind a price that the consumer's not paying somewhere in the world. And that's not in the US. So we're exporting our bad behavior somewhere else. The last thing is, there are bales, some photos in the presentation I did of bales of apparel. We export a lot of used apparel, tons and tons of used apparel from the US to other countries. We also export surplus retail goods from the US all over the world. This is things owned by retailers there's no market for. The most famous, and then we're not talking about like $1,000 worth of stuff. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of unsold apparel that we ship to South America, to Africa, to parts of Asia, to places where we dump the horrible t-shirts that we don't want, or the shoes that didn't sell, or last year's pants, or whatever it is. All of this leftover stuff, it's baled up and shipped to countries all over the world. So we consumers have the power to really change this and to really push for better things, but we have to be willing to pay more for an item when we buy it. And that may not be easy to take, but it isn't a whole lot more. Labor is a very tiny piece of the cost of apparel, but it should be fair labor prices. I'm going to say one more thing before I go. Right? We often think of the low wages for apparel workers as a developing country problem. And there's recently been a lot of work done in California where people are doing garment construction and being paid for piecework, where they are making $1.58 an hour, $2 an hour. So this is not just a developing country problem. Our small apparel industry in the US also has abuses of workers. So this is a case where we need to rethink how we're doing this. It's prevalent in the Midwest, Southeast, and California, in the Los Angeles area, where we have garment workers who are not being paid fair wages because they are outside of the minimum wage system. There is federal legislation coming to fix this loophole, and hopefully it will be done soon. But these are workers who have no power. Often they don't have legal status in the US, which is why they're doing the piecework for below minimum wage. So I just don't want us to think this is it's all happening in Vietnam or Bangladesh.
No,
So thank you so much. I didn't mean to end on a note. Let me go back to Millie's really upbeat note. It comes down to what we value, and I think we should value the people who are working to make all these clothes for us, the designers who are designing it, respect them, and better design will give us a better apparel future.
I'd like to add one place where people can consider donating at least certain items. You mentioned things like the women's shelters. The other is refugee shelters.
Yes.
Casa Elitas, for instance, and they want certain specific things because of the kind of people that they have, and the size of people that they have. So you can check Catholic Charities or Steve Kozachik's newsletter to find out specifically what they're looking for. But that would be a great place to donate, and check maybe also with the International Rescue Committee here in town.
Yeah, I'm gonna can I add something there, Paula? It's a great idea. If you have something that you think is valuable and it's not on someone's list, it's worth an email to ask if they'd be interested in. I recently did do a closet and shoe clean out, and I looked on one of the sites. It was for, is it Sister Jose's?
For Jose, yeah.
Yeah, Sister Jose's. they were looking for walking shoes. I had a lot of, comfortable boots, heels, other kinds of things. And other clothes I wanted to get that weren't on their list. And I just emailed them to say, do you want? I gave them a list of what it was, and they shot back, absolutely. It was all workwear, etc. So you may, if you're gonna do a closet clean out, or you're gonna do like a block, everybody on the block pulls together what they've got to get rid of, or give to someone else. You might want to just reach out and see if a charity you like wants what you have, because they wanted workwear, they just didn't have it on their list. So I had suits and all kinds of things that have now got a good home.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been an amazing presentation, Kathleen. I think
Thank
we've
you.
all learned a lot.